Hi, everyone. John Michael Coppola here, and welcome to the Chicago Theater Makers Podcast, where we chat with the actors, directors, choreographers, designers, producers, music directors, lyricists, playwrights, and all the artists who make the Chicago area theaters come alive. We're so excited to have you here with us today. But before we get started, we just want to remind you to please like, subscribe to, and share this podcast with your friends and colleagues who you think would appreciate the conversations we're having. We'd be so grateful for your support in this way so we can continue to bring these stories for years to come. Thanks again for being here, and now, curtain up on today's episode. Today's guest is a multiple Jeff Award nominee and three-time winner who has been working in Chicago and throughout the United States for more than 3 decades. Some of his more notable credits include Fiddler on the Roof, Beauty and the Beast, and Crazy for You at Drury Lane Theatre, No Man's Land and Noises Off at Steppenwolf, Titanic, Oliver, and Anything Goes at Marriott Theatre, and most recently, the First Lady of Television at Northlight Theatre. He spent 5 years on the national tour of The Lion King, covering the roles of Zazu, Timon, and Pumba. Finally, he's a proud member of SAG, AFTRA, AGMA, and Actors Equity Association, and sits on the boards of Equity and Season of Concern, Chicago's primary fundraising organization, which focuses its efforts on the physical and mental wellness of those who share their gifts in the performing arts. For more information on Season of Concern, please visit the link in our show notes. I hope you enjoy my conversation with my good friend, Mark David Kaplan. Now let's go to the top of the show. Hi, Mark. How are you, my friend?
I'm great. How are you, my friend, John Michael?
I'm well. Thanks so much for joining me on the podcast.
So happy to be here.
Me too. So I'd like to ask all of our guests the same question to the very top of each episode. And that would be, please tell our listeners a little bit about where you're from, a little bit about your background, your training, but most importantly, what your first theater experience was. And I hand it over to you.
Thank you. You ask everyone this.
I do.
I am originally from Western Pennsylvania. I grew up in a family of musicians and loudmouths. My parents
You're Italian?
Exactly. I'm Jewish. It's the same
Same
thing, right?
Same thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we're all eating. That's what's important.
And the
Everybody's
guilt
eating.
is exactly the same. Right.
Exactly the same. Yes, indeed. My parents met, they were musicians. They met at Carnegie, my mother will tell you Carnegie Tech because Mellon was not involved yet.
Oh.
They met as music majors. Um, uh, both both of my sisters, my siblings, I'm in the middle, on either side also decided to go into this business. So, we were lucky because we had parents who said yes to everything, as opposed to those parents who might have been, oh, don't you want to try to do this instead, or this has a better paycheck, or this is more,
Yeah.
sustainable in the world. My parents had already been through that. So, you know, they both had, doctors and dentists, and they were like, don't you want to go into biology? And my dad said, no. So he did that work for me. He was a trumpet player and he stuck to it. He can still buzz at 95. My mom was a voice and piano major. So that's where I started in Western Pennsylvania. I ended up going to Syracuse University, a few hours north of where I lived in Western PA. And after that, I followed my sister, Judy, who had gone to Northwestern. I followed her after having visited Chicago so many times and falling in love with it and realizing what everybody does know now, that it's the second city because that's a nickname. But, theater is thriving and kind of in a lot of different ways, not paralleled to Chicago.
Yeah.
I mean, and I've lived in New York, and we'll get into that, but Chicago became my home because of that. Both my sisters lived there at a certain point in time. They now do not, but I'm left. Uh, I'm the one who's left. And the part about what, so what started me in this business and my first theater experience. Well, besides, doing things in school and realizing that my parents, would, rather than saying, aren't you going to be in, student council, they'd be like, don't you want to be in the school play? And even at a young age, I started that. But I will tell you, one of the first times I realized that I knew I wanted to do this,
Yeah.
I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, which was not far from the Ohio border, and just beyond in Ravenna, Ohio, was Kenley Players, which I'm sure a lot of people who
Yes.
and we all know there's quite a history, and they moved around. But I remember at the age of 11 going to see Kiss Me Kate with my parents. at Kenley Players in maybe it was Warren or Ravenna, wherever they were at the time,
Yeah.
starring John Raitt
Oh, yes.
and Patrice Munsell, and then in the other roles in
Lois and
Lois
Bill.
and Bill
Yeah.
were Karen Morrow, who I met years later at a cabaret convention, and Ken Berry, who 30 years ago
Yeah.
I did Lend Me a Tenor with in Michigan. So talk about didn't realize at the time. And I remember it's one of the first times I realized we were in the first row of the mezzanine, and I started to do this, and my parents realized number one I needed glasses, but I was so enthralled by it. You may talk about leaning forward in theater. I could do nothing but lean forward. I mean, I was so enthralled. I remember telling that to Ken Berry, oh my gosh, so many years later when I worked with him. And I said, I have to tell you, uh, one of the reasons I'm doing this is watching you sing and dance. And I realized that knew you were on F Troop. And, I don't know why I'm getting emotional about F Troop and Ken Berry, but the reality of knowing that he was somebody tangible and real, and he was in a real theater experience in a room where it's different every night. And here he is doing it. And I got to tell him all of that. And you know what, John? And here I am, doing Lend Me a Tenor with him and running lines with him, where I'm like, he was like, hey, would you mind being on book for me with the scene? I would love nothing more than to run lines with you. So that's that's one of my how I started and decided to do this business stories.
Oh, I love
Him,
that. And the
him.
fact, I always love when they come full circle, too,
Oh my
because it
gosh.
brings out these emotions in people all the time.
Absolutely. And it was a brilliant moment for me. And I hope for him. He looked at me and he sort of laughed because he would tell stories, and he was so great in the show, by the way. He was amazing. And it was at Cherry County Playhouse, which at the time was in Muskegon, Michigan.
Oh, yeah.
And they had stars. It was 1 week, like week and a half of rehearsal, and I think like a week and a half of performances.
Yeah.
And I did 2 shows in the season, and he was the star of Lend Me a Tenor. He played, the theater producer, and he was hilarious.
Wow.
And it was even in the 90s, he was like, I'm going to take you and shake you like this. Is that okay? I mean,
Yeah.
no intimacy directors at the time. And I was like, yes, you could shake me as much as you want.
Yeah.
And he also taught me that he was doing it like he's an actor. He's a brilliant physical comedian.
Yeah.
And he was asking me, I was like, yes, yes, and the whole time. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, of course, not just F Troop, but all the years on Mama's Family.
oh, Mama's Family, Carol
Yeah.
Burnett. I
Yeah.
mean, that's a show I like. I wish those were still around, where you could go sing and dance.
Yeah.
And another full circle, the people who used to do those medleys and arrangements were named Ken and Mitzi Welch. And where did they go? To Carnegie Tech with my parents.
No way!
Yep,
That
yep,
is crazy.
crazy. It's a vast country, but it's a small world.
Yeah. Wow.
You know,
Wow. That just proves it right there. Now,
truly.
since we're on this subject, I mean, I'm not
Yeah.
that Karen Berry was someone who inspired you, but maybe he did. Tell us about some of the people who did influence you during your career, or maybe still do to this day.
Uh, well, I mean, not to be obvious and sappy, but my parents,
Yeah.
because they encouraged all of us to do what we wanted to do.
Yeah.
If it was this, and they knew it was this, but if it ever wasn't this, they would be fine with that too. So, with respect to that's the first. That would be my first answer to that question.
Sure.
Other people, and I did mention, I had lived in New York, and I lived in New York basically in the late '90s for a bit, and went back and forth. Still had a foothold in Chicago, but started to work there, and then went out on tour, and then in the mid 2000s, Michael and I decided, my husband Michael decided, we decided to go back and sort of permanently live in Chicago
Yeah.
because we knew we could work anywhere. That's the other joy of this. But the people that I know that, especially when I was in New York, um, and again, it's one of those things I wore out albums, I listened to people's works when there were albums, people. We actually played the whole thing on one side and turned it over and played the other side. A needle.
Mm.
Um, Someone like William Finn. He
Mm.
was huge. Um, and it's a lot of time the composers and the and the writers and the people who created the stories that we get to tell.
Mhm.
that's, I think, where it starts. And then after that, I think the people who, I mean, I guess I would say, and Sondheim, I mean, again, a lot of people feel that, but the fact that I actually got to meet these people and often audition for them afterwards, that even made it more of going, oh, you're a regular person that's just trying to figure this out like we are. I mean, every story um, deserves sort of to be unfolded, and you get that. You haven't written something and said, okay, here it is, do it. You know,
Yeah.
it's like, how are you going to do this? Um, and those people that I've gotten to work with, I have close friends who have admired me. So many people in the Chicago, or have admired me. Listen to me, who I have admired and hope have admired me in return. Um, but there have been casts of people who I feel like, oh my gosh, casts and directors where I'm like, yeah, you have been one of my mainstays because I'd like to work with you again and again and again. And I guess they're too numerous to name. People like that, you know. And I also had people that I love, I love what they do and how they create their work. And they're not necessarily people who, I mean, I love writers. I love writers. I love people like, this might be weird. I love people like Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert, who are who are at the crux. They're in the middle of what's going on in the world.
Yeah.
Like I would argue we are too, John. But
Mm-hmm.
people sort of think that was just a story, and nowadays it's like, we can talk more about that later. That story's real, and that's why
Right.
we're telling it.
Right.
But people who know how to entertain, but also know how to inform and zero in on something that's really important.
Yeah.
So people like that.
I have to agree with you, and I'm actually going to jump ahead to one of the questions I just added this morning to our
Oh yes,
conversation.
yeah.
You mentioned that you're a fan of playwrights and also people telling the stories that need to be told. To which I wanted to point out that we had James Sherman on the podcast, one of our first guests here, who was the writer of First Lady of Television that you just closed at Northlight Theatre. And one of the things that stuck with me, part of my conversation with James, is he pointed out that the word playwright is spelled Playwright, which is an old Elizabethan word, which means like to create something, like a wheelwright. And so he creates opportunities for people to tell these stories. So that stuck with me, and like I can recite it verbatim, and I've done it I think no less than 2 other times on this podcast since then. But I want to touch on First Lady of Television because that play obviously is very relevant to our current political situation, and I want to just feel you out and see like how the audience response was, particularly when you did the Q&As after the show, and what kind of feedback and response you got from the audience about that play.
Yeah. First off, I mean, I have to say, I mean, in general, this career for me has always been, it's a million things. It's hard. It's frustrating. It's, please don't take this personally.
No.
Move along. It's all the things that you and I both know it is.
Yeah.
But it is a genuine privilege for me. Number one, and I will say this, it doesn't happen very often. I got asked to do this play based on the story, based on who I am and what they thought I could bring to the story, based on who Jim is. And again, who BJ Jones, who directed it, who's the artistic director of Northlight Theatre, where the play was performed. I was fortunate to be involved in it, to know what a real sort of from page to stage collaboration can be like. And we've been involved with them, and it's important. It's a learning curve. It's about collaboration. It's about listening. It's about keeping your mind open and taking blinders off, and realizing that whatever parameters. And I will say too, as well, John, at the point where I am in my life, I'm not 90, but I'm also not 40. Realizing that I was supposed to be there, and there's a reason that they wanted to hear from me in this room. And the element of that in telling a story like this, which also remained so incredibly fluid once we got to the run of this show. It's everything I love about theater anyway, that if the audience doesn't know this, and we talked about this in talkbacks, I will always inform them. I said, it was so different tonight. based on you and you and you. And there was a response, particularly from over here, I think, just sort of say, I'm in the play, but, especially in an environment like Northlight, we're all there together and
Yeah.
we know we're there together.
Yeah.
So the element of that, still not answering your question. I will get to your question.
That's okay.
But
You take all the time you need. There's no stopwatch here.
amazing. Thank you. Because I don't know what that means. Uh, but the reality of when we did this play, and I'm sure Jim told you, he wrote it during the Biden administration. And it wasn't a fiction. I mean, if people watch Jim's podcast with you, they know this was about McCarthyism and in a very particular, you know, account of somebody's journey through being blacklisted in 1950. And it's about history. It's about the first woman who created it, actually went from a radio show to a TV show, Gertrude Berg, and that's where the frame of reference for the title comes, First Lady of Television. That it was in fact not Lucille Ball, it was Gertrude Berg.
Yeah.
And she was writing about a Jewish family, in New York, so that's where that comes from. But the reality was, when we would have these talkbacks, we did this when the whole Jimmy Kimmel thing happened,
Sure.
and he was, I mean, you could look in, from the outside into it and go, oh God, what foolishness, they can't do this. And there's so many people who don't have a frame of reference to history, and that's okay. Like, they can't do this. And you're like, but you don't understand. They did it. They've done it before. And they're doing it again.
Yeah.
And pardon me, the stupid people who are doing it some of them are smart enough to know that this did happen, and that's why they're doing it again. But so many people who have no idea what history is and which end of it they're going to be on now, by trying to, censor somebody's free speech. When we got to those, particularly that week, John, we would have people so emotional in the audience, and we were preaching already to the followers.
Sure.
They got it. And I'm not saying just because theater folk, but they got it. We had very fulsome discussions around this, but people were so amazed, and younger people who were like, I can't believe it. This happening to Jimmy Kimmel. Like, yeah. I mean, the world is so different with with social media and everybody getting to chime in. The biggest thing I would always make the delineation of, like, we didn't have this in 1950.
Right.
I mean, there were people who rightly didn't believe it because they were just hearing about it for the first time. The first time they heard about it, or the means to the end had already happened, and people were finding out what the result was. So, around just the things that were said in 1950 by all sides, people who were on the right, people who were on the left, they were all said. I mean, Charlottesville, some of the same things were being said by white supremacists that were being said in Peekskill, New York in 1950, when they were burning Paul Robeson in effigy, So get to do that is so palpable. It's so incredibly palpable. And it was 75 minutes straight through. I know you saw it. It was very, I loved that it was different every night. And I loved it from the perspective of all the collaborative experiences we had leading up to performing it.
Yeah.
But the group of people, those 6 people who were on stage together, we trusted each other so much. We trusted with everything. I would hand over everything I have to my castmates, because it was hard. What we were doing was really hard. It was hard for us. And if anybody doesn't believe that, it's like, come on, folks.
Yeah.
This is art. Yes, it is art, but it's all real stuff that we wake up with every day. We came in, we talked about, and then we did the play.
Yeah.
And then we all had to breathe out. And, I went home and walked my dog and, often had a drink, You know what I mean? It's just, it affects every element of who you are.
Yeah.
And that, to me, that experience and getting to do it, again, I come back to the word privilege. It was a privilege to get to do.
It's so refreshing to hear you say that was the response of the audience, particularly the younger people who were there. I have to say, didn't see it live, but I recorded that live telecast of Good Night and Good Luck that George Clooney did. And
Yes.
as thrilling as it was to watch live theater being broadcast,
Hmm.
I felt that a lot of the context of what was happening wasn't portrayed as clearly as First Lady of Television was, because
Wow.
James just
Yeah.
had a knack for laying it all out in plain language. This is what's happening. If this
Yeah.
happens to him, this could happen to all of us, and this is how the dominoes can fall. And Good Night, Good Luck was a lot more. I don't want to say cloaked, but I feel like you really needed to have more of a knowledge of what was happening before
Yes.
you entered the world of that play. Whereas
Right.
James's, even if you didn't have an idea of what you were about to see, you walked away understanding what was going on.
Yeah.
Which is quite
You,
remarkable, because I mean I know
it
that
is.
Good Night Good Luck was a movie first, and I
Right.
want to now I want to go see the movie to see how much of it was really in line with the movie, just to see if the movie gives you any more detail about the fragility of the situation and how worrisome the situation is. It didn't
Yeah.
it just I don't know, it felt like, to me, Good Night Good Luck felt like it was a more of a personal attack on Edward R. Murrow and his, which it was, but
It was. Yeah.
it didn't seem like it was looming for everybody. It just seemed like it was very sort of myopic.
It was, yeah, and I think and it's interesting. You're speaking to a few things, if I may.
Yeah.
There's an accessibility that Jim was able to create,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's also maybe that the medium. And again, hooray for theater, right? There's something about, I'm not sure. That's an interesting thing to sort of divulge. And if you watch the film, maybe that will become apparent to you that it actually did start as a film script, and then
Mm-hmm.
it moved to stage. And I love that George Clooney did it, but there's also a certain kind of, dare I say, inherent loftiness to
Mm-hmm.
putting George Clooney on a stage
Yes.
and telling a story that, and I don't know, untouchable, not the right. Like, I think like there's an accessibility that is about, and it's funny, we did talk about this in one of the talkbacks, because there was an older woman who said, yeah, we knew what was happening with Hollywood people. And there was a delineation in our play between what happened in Hollywood, and then they came and said, well, it's happening in Hollywood. Let's put together a list. It's my line. It's like, why don't we put together a list and see if we can't get some television people blacklisted?
Mm-hmm.
However, television didn't, yet again, like I say, there was no internet, there was no, palpable at your fingertips, sort of finding out what's going on.
Yeah.
This woman said, we knew what was happening to people in Hollywood. We didn't know about sort of the every people of television.
Mm.
And in our story, it is about people. Philip Loeb was a union leader for, for stage actors, for screen actors, for radio actors. He was on all of those fledgling starts of
Yeah.
giving people, making sure people were being paid and weren't being taken advantage of. But to most people, he was a nobody. So there's something about a real story about real people. And also speaks to, I would say too, it speaks to Jim Sherman.
Mm-hmm.
He's been doing, God, I love him. He's been doing this for 4 decades now. And
Yeah.
you know, I've watched, it's funny. I told him the first day and he was so sweet. And I was literally, like I told you, it's like, again, patting myself on the back. He said, you were the person that I wanted to do this. I'm so glad you're available. And I was like,
Mm.
gosh, thanks. And then I said to him, and it's true, my sister Judy, who I was mentioned I had followed to Chicago, was a Northwestern graduate,
Yeah.
did one of his very, very first readings of his play called Beau Jest.
Oh
And
wow.
and I told him that. He was like, oh my God, Judy Kaplan. And then he says to me, he goes, well, my future now ex-wife ended up doing that part. I said, I understand. I mean, Judy did the first reading, and it wasn't like she was gonna move on to it, but like the first production of it was done, with somebody that he loved and adored. And I was like, yeah, go for it. But Judy, it was funny. It's like point being, I've watched and read and listened to Jim for so long now. And I love that he also kind of an everyman of the theater
Yeah.
got to tell this story. And so much of it, John, is his voice. There's a moment when when Gertrude says, I don't like controversy. I don't like confrontation. And, when I came to Bill Paley, I said, it's a simple family. It's a Jewish family. There's no, there's little wisdom, a little this, a little that, but no fighting. And that's Jim Sherman. Like, that is Jim Sherman. We were like, finally, we were like, that's Jim talking. That's Jim Sherman. And we told him and he laughed. He was like, yeah,
Yeah.
playwright.
It was nice that he could recognize and laugh at himself in there. He
Yes.
could just point
And
it
I
out
think
to
he
him.
was at a point in his life and his writing career where he's like, yeah, I know it's me. And I know there's a reason that I'm writing this story. Because he was originally asked by B.J. Jones to write this,
Right. Tell me that.
which was so interesting. And I was like, oh, gosh, you really put you in this story, which is amazing. What we all hope for,
Yeah. And we touched on my conversation with James that he writes the world that he knows. Like, one of my questions was, if you had lived somewhere else, outside of Chicago, do you think your plays would have had a different sort of language and different feel? He goes, well, absolutely. Just like Neil Simon's plays all reek of Brooklyn. I was like, that's true. It makes a whole lot of sense.
Indeed.
His plays are very much a part of him.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some theater experiences that have stayed with you. Either, of course, First Theater Television was very recent, but any of the ones that you either have been a part of or that you've experienced as an audience member. We should, because we're the Chicago Theater Makers podcast, preferably here in Chicago, but if there's one elsewhere in the world that you experienced, please bring that forward as well.
Yeah. Well, the thing about my journey in particular in Chicago, and it's all so inclusive. My those experiences that I want to share with you are also inclusive of who I am in this business and who I was at the time of the business, and the things that I had been told perhaps, or, we're told a lot of things in this business, what we're going to be or what we're not going to be. I remember leaving school and, I'm telling you this because I'm totally fine with it, but I had somebody at Syracuse in my list of professors who 2 weeks before I graduated said, uh, you're very talented. You're not going to work for 20 years. So just be used to that.
How
And I was like, yeah, rude. Exactly. I choose to think that this person said this to me and didn't believe it and was just trying to keep the fire lit under my tush, so
okay.
that's
Fair.
what I choose.
Yeah, good.
They are now dead and gone, so I can't really ask them. But I think at one point, I actually went back. There was a full circle moment where I did. Actually, I'll start with that one. There was a full circle moment, and it's not Chicago, I'm sorry, but I went back to Syracuse. The Syracuse University has Syracuse Stage attached to it, which is a time-honored Lord Theater that has been running for decades, that I used to, work on shows as an undergrad and get to go see. We literally were in the same, our dressing room spaces were shared in a lot of that. So it was totally cool. Years after I graduated, it was 11 years ago now, in 2014, I went back to Syracuse and played Wilbur in Hairspray.
That's a role I want to play.
It would be great.
Yeah,
yes. I mean, I always wondered, I thought, and that's one of those roles where I'm sure this teacher was like that, 20 years from now. Well, he's right in that sense. But I got to play it opposite one of my dearest friends from school who did Broadway and did other lived in New York for a long time. Yeah. And then he and his husband moved back upstate where he was from and taught at Casanova College, but also did a couple of days teaching at Syracuse. My friend David Lowenstein, I don't know if you know who David is. But
I know the name, yeah.
He played Edna and I played Wilbur. And it turns out that I had gotten submitted. So it starts in Chicago. I got submitted from Chicago, which is an amazing thing that we can be submitted for things all over the place.
Yeah.
And I got to go back and speak to students in school where people came and spoke to me as a student. And I was that guy who, could say, hey, this could be you too.
Yeah.
And and plus I loved doing that. I loved being somebody who, what I started to say years past when I first started, I was the goofy friend, or I was I could sing and dance. So I was not your typical chorus boy in terms of, at the time, stature and look.
Yeah.
And I don't know, this, for whatever that means. I just was something a little left of center, which is where I usually was placed on the stage, left of center. But I got to do all that stuff. Chicago afforded me to jump in and be things that I wouldn't be seen for at a chorus call in New York.
Mm,
Like like one of the first shows I did, I jumped into the chorus of Gypsy, you know.
mm,
I played Yonkers in Gypsy and understudied Tulsa, you know.
yeah.
Got to understudy the kid who gets to sing and dance pretty, you know. Uh, but I got to do that because there are people who understood that we contain multitudes, and
Hmm.
yeah, I can do that. I can do that in this number. And then he also I got to be character people and other stuff. Like I was, what was I, Pasty, the girl walked. We got to get another stripper. That guy,
Right, right.
all those people. And now my goal in that is to see. I keep saying I come full circle with plays. I want to be Herbie next, so it's time.
Yeah.
Somebody out there in podcast land. Um, but those shows that I had been seen for chorus and ensemble, even in New York. I was seen for Ragtime, was seen for a bunch of these shows. I was seen for Titanic way back when.
Mm,
In Chicago, years later, I got to play Tata in Ragtime.
yeah,
I got to play Isidore Strauss in Titanic. I
yeah.
got to play these roles that I grew into and I knew were inside of me. So I got to play Tevye. Finally,
Mm.
I don't want to say finally. I started as Perchik when I was 17. So it's,
Mhm.
Fiddler's the gift that keeps on giving, I
Yes,
guess.
yes, yeah.
And it's a beautiful story to tell. And that would be something that informed me through the years of who I was and the different facets of me. Because in so many ways, Fiddler is like a first lady. It's just people just trying to live their lives and tell a story,
Yeah.
and just be who they are in the moment. And as you know, I got to cover Fiddler at the Lyric, and then a year and a half later, I got to do it
Yes, you did.
with you in the room,
Yes, you
which
did.
was a
To,
gift,
to
just
great
a
to
gift.
great success, I might add. You were
Thank you,
brilliant in Fiddler.
thank you very much, my friend. Yeah,
Of course.
but I was exactly where I was supposed to be
Hmm.
because of all the things I did before that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you know, I'm about to play Mr. Mushnick for the third time in my life, which is
Fantastic.
fine because I never really I got to sing Seymour in college, but never got to do it. But I have those shows where I played one role and now I'm playing the father of that role, if you
Yeah,
will,
yeah.
which I love. I love it. It's like bring it on. I love it. I have so many, I have a contingent of people in our amazing Chicago theater community
Yeah.
who call me father or uncle, and
Oh,
I'm all over it, you
yeah,
know.
yeah.
I was seen for Beauty and the Beast years ago. Never got it. Played Maurice here in town. You know.
Yeah,
So no.
that happened at some point. I would like to chat also about, well, two topics. Number one, Forbidden Broadway, which you were part of for many, many years.
Yes,
I'm
yes.
just kind of curious because it speaks to the multitudes that you mentioned that we all have inside of us. Which version of Forbidden Broadway was your favorite? You did so many and all
Gosh.
over the place.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think I have different numbers and different versions
Okay.
in my head for very specific reasons. And I will say that too. I'm going to say that when you talked about people who influenced me and my idols, um, I will say this about Gerard Alessandrini, who created that show.
Hmm.
And you know, that is one of those things that I listened to the albums of,
Hmm.
and it wasn't much before I went to school that it had started, but I listened to that and I thought, through all the people that I've already sort of said, for whatever reasons, are telling you that you can't do something or you won't do something
Yeah.
until a certain period of time.
Yeah.
I listened to those, and I thought, this is what I do all the time. Like I walked around when Tootsie the movie, and I was like, oh, it's a lovely blast. Like I started doing them, and I sort of thought, and I had friends who go, oh, great, so you're gonna hide behind somebody else. I'm like, no, I'm not. Like that's about technique and my ear. And then I
Yeah.
realized once I got to do Forbidden Broadway, it's about all of this. It's not about, and as you remember, I directed
Yeah.
you in Forbidden Broadway. The
Hmm.
reality is everybody has to find their in and their way into the material.
Yeah.
It's not about how somebody else did it. It's not even how the person you are aping
Right.
did it.
Right.
It's about what you bring to it. And that's what I loved about getting the opportunity to work with Gerard. That I was like, oh, so you're not about carbon copying. That's great. I mean, you know what you want, and we have to find, as we say, we find the hook. We have to find the hook, and then be kind to ourselves that we're not the same height as Mandy Patinkin by any means, or and I'm not even a tenor, but somehow I found it. Somehow it was there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I found my version of it. I loved the numbers. I started with Forbidden Hollywood in the mid '90s. That's how I came into the Forbidden world. And it was one of those auditions. And I will say this because I was in Chicago. And at the time, I didn't realize that they were looking for a cover, because now I know, after having done Forbidden for so many years on and off, they often bring somebody who they know is a sure thing. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's fine. So they brought in my friend David Benoit, who, again, I've worked with many times. He did Fiddler lyric. He played Laser Wolf. So, talk about gifts that keep on returning to your life.
Yeah.
I covered him in the show, and I loved it, because they gave you everything I loved about Forbidden was everything that everybody else who was auditioning in town hated. They were like, I can't, no, they threw like 7 sides at me. And I was like, I know, isn't it amazing? They were like, what's the matter with you? So even more, I was like, okay, you're othering me into this job because I seem to be like the only person who should do this job.
Yeah.
And I walked into the room, John, and it was, and our friend John Friedson was there. And he goes, and they said at this audition, and anyone that you do, if it's not in the material, and they were like, concentrate on film people, And they were like, who do you do? I said, well, I do a lot of like lines from people. They were like, well, go. She's closing up the library. So I did a little bit of him. And then I did Jimmy Stewart at different times in his life. And, then there was they wrote a Jimmy Stewart number, which I did on the road. They wrote me a Roberto Benigni number eventually in Forbidden Hollywood.
Brilliant. It's Roberto Benigni.
Oh my God, where they were like, and they wrote it for me. So the reality, they wrote me years ago. I did Forbidden Christmas in Detroit, and they wrote me a Tony Bennett number. I'm Tony Bennett. Hey, the fact that he can't, God bless him, he's like, it was Christmas and Forbidden Christmas. So it was a Liza and Tony Bennett number.
Oh my God.
And it starts with him, like the lights come up and he like can't really see. And it says, dropped my glasses in an open fire. And it goes from there. And then Liza comes out and goes, oh, Tony, I love you so much. And I played her too. So, oh my God, I played her as well. So there's that. But those elements, I would say when I first did it off Broadway in '99, it was Forbidden Broadway cleans up its act. Okay. And it's the first time I got to do, the thing I loved about it was the time when you did the show, people in the shows you were parroting came to see the show.
Uh-huh.
And I remember Tom Plotkin, who was a Forbidden Broadway alum, was doing Footloose. And he came to see, and they're howling. Heather Headley came to see the Aida parody, and she's, and I knew her from Chicago again, but she was just down the block from us, and she was howling. I mean, the people who came, like Rue McClanahan, I loved everything about it. It was the little show that could always, because there you are in the basement of, next to Cats.
Right.
Who we also said, we've been here so long, Cats gave us rats. You know what I mean? We were in the basement of Ellen's Stardust Diner, having a coffee machine drip on our costumes from above. But somehow you go out and there I am as Alan Cumming, and I'm staring in the audience and Alan Cumming is staring back at me. Those things.
Oh my gosh.
Where, I'm doing him,
Yeah.
And it's those moments where I love when art is like, okay, this is kind of a mirror right now, but not, but I'm doing it for you. So
yeah,
you're doing it full throttle, but you're also like, is that okay?
Getting their permission.
Am I okay? So many experiences I loved about Forbidden. And then I loved directing it. I loved directing you in it. I loved, the things that different people found, because at its finest, that show is an example of collaboration and inclusion and fun. Oh my God, so much fun.
It was fun. I will have to say though, I'm relieved to hear you say like it doesn't need to be a carbon copy or like you have to nail the person to the person you're mimicking, because that was the biggest um, trick for me. Like, I was
Right.
nervous that I wasn't doing it all justice,
Yeah.
and you were so gracious during the rehearsal, saying, "No, no, no, you just, we need to find your way to do it."
Do you? Yeah.
And that really helped a lot, and I think was the success for all of us. I mean, the four of us that did that show had never done
Oh,
it
it's
before.
terrific. You
Yeah,
and Ben Evans and Val Fagan and Aaron McGuire,
Aaron
who I called,
McGuire
called my mini Liza, who just, she
nailed it,
began
nailed
a
it.
career of like doing Liza because, and this is actually what you speak to. And I'm glad, thank you for saying all of that. The reality is, so many times I loved directing it where it was not sort of in New York, where there was a sort of a already inherent hubbub and expectation with the show.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that sometimes that's what we have to do as artists, say, I can bring you all of that, but I wasn't in the room when that person created it. So can we can we start at my square one
Right.
and not worry about what so I've always wanted to be the kind of collaborator, and in those cases the director who says, I've been on both sides of this table. I've actually been all around this table. I've been at the window peering in at this table. you know
Yeah.
I want you to find the way to do this. And lots of times on the road, when I did it in Australia, I
Oh,
directed it in Melbourne, Australia. We took numbers out because
sure.
and we would talk. It was collaborative, and they were. I mean, I wanted to do justice to the material, but I was like, when I did my research and found out these people aren't going to know this,
Yeah.
A- and I don't want. I mean, they're still great, but I created things around people and around material that I knew they were going to do. And the fact that I chose Aaron McGuire, who I was going to say was the atypical choice at the time, was an atypical choice to play Liza. It was usually, there's a soprano and there's a belter, although they both do both.
Right. Right.
Um, but there was that archetype of the person who does Liza. Thank God, our dear friend Christine Petty, who was always like,
Mm.
she was Liza, she was Merman, she was all those people that typically she would always say, one of the men should do this because they sound more like Mormon than I do. You know what I mean? It's like, to which I say now, why not? You
Right.
know,
Yeah.
but there's a certain of expectation that we didn't need to worry about
Right.
on the road when we did it. But it should be like that all the time. So
And thank you for sharing all that, because I love when I get to chat with people here. We have a shared experience that we get to talk about. I'd like to have our listeners know a little bit more about Seasons of Concern, because you've been on the board of that for many
yeah,
years. Some of them listening may not be familiar with the organization and what some of the resources are. So could
right,
you
right,
please give us a little information about that and for who the resources
absolutely,
are for as well?
yeah, absolutely. Season of Concern has been around. Well, it started as the brain. The brain behind it came about because of people attached to the business, many of them actors, writers, creators, theater producers. In '85, uh, two people, but Pat Miller and Biscotto, two people who were creators who were friends, died of AIDS.
Hmm.
Um, and people got together at a memorial, and it was at the I mean, I was certainly affected as a young actor and as an artist, and not even here quite yet of what was going on uh, in the in the world at large, but in great part, in our community,
Yeah.
with people dying of the gay cancer. And I was around for all of when people uh, were not able to say the words either out loud, or if there were a family member.
Mm-hmm.
you know I was around as a scared young gay person at the time. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we all, and then we realized it was, all the things. It was not just a gay disease, and we
Mm-hmm.
figured out what it was. But it was when people, it was like a little engine that could. It was that people in this community got together and said, well, how are we going to honor our two friends who've died? And then after Larry Sloan, a bunch of other creators in the business who also died. Um, and it was people got together and started this community, and it was about passing the bucket, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And it is very much like what was happening with Broadway Cares, but on a Chicago centric level.
Right.
um, we don't have the same outreach as obviously as Broadway Cares has, because just of the demographics alone. And Broadway is something of different numbers than our theater community is. But since then, we've started to pass a bucket, and that turned into the season of concern. The season to collect was often during the holidays. So we would get theaters in town we would get somebody in a cast to make a speech about what we were doing.
Mm-hmm.
And people opened their purses and their wallets and threw money in buckets, threw money into buckets. As a community member, I want to say in the late 80s and the early 90s, I became very involved. It just raising money. It wasn't just about passing the bucket. Now it was about how do we keep these funds and these grants fluid and viable and and open and growing.
Right.
And again, that's very little engine that could in its approach. But we would do things like bowl-a-thons. We would do competitions with theaters about who was going to raise money. We started to do cabarets. We started to bring in people of star level to do events and donate the funds to that. And I was involved as a community member at the time, and I was even, amidst the time with some of my theater contemporaries, going to rallies and getting arrested,
Yeah.
arrested because at the time Mayor Richard J. Daley was not saying the AIDS word. So, so just the fact I say all of that because that was affecting our community as well. Community of artists and Season of Concern. I am now flash forward however many years. It's been about 6 years. I was asked to be a board member. I am a board member. I'm still a member of the community, which is great. The board didn't used to include so many sort of still active working members of the community. And I'm proud to say, under my, voluntary employ, we have since begun to populate the board with people who are still working in the community. And when I say community, the greatest thing that Season of Concern does, it's anybody who makes art and theater maker, and that means anybody who's working in any space. It can be front of house. It can be designers. It can be directors. It can be playwrights. It can be just the all-inclusive collaborative world that makes our art tick. And for years, we have been raising money. Seasonofconcern.org. You can hear more tributes and more eloquent words than what I have given you here. But even since during the pandemic, I should shout out to, there was a dear and wonderful stage manager for years at Steppenwolf named Malcolm Ewan, who sadly died a few years ago of cancer. I called him one of my equity parents because on the board of Actors Equity, the governance board, he was one of my parents in the business. He told me how to relate to producers behind negotiation tables and things like that. Well, when he passed away of cancer, he, God bless him, had set aside a very substantial fund to give to Season of Concern. And now we have the Malcolm Ewan Fund. And that is for anybody who needs help at any time, regardless of it doesn't have to be a medical emergency. I mean, see, the Boscato Miller grant is for one thing, but anybody, and people have taken a great advantage of it, I'm proud to say, in the last, 5 years of what we've been going through in terms of people. A lot of people, your viewers might not know, your listeners might not know, we lose money, we lose work, which happened during the pandemic, we lose our insurance. So,
Right.
So I'm proud that I'm a member of that organization. We have a lot of great things happening. If you go to seasonconcern.org, we're collaborating with so many great people. We have a wonderful managing director who just started this year, who's a great friend of the community, if I can say names, Christopher
Please.
Pasternak.
Yeah.
They are a brilliant person who I've known, again, community, for 15, 16 years when they were an intern in marketing at Chicago Shakes.
Wow.
They have since run theaters, and they now are our only staff member, our fully paid staff member at Season of Concern. And it's exciting. What we're doing is exciting. So if you want to help, we can take all of your help, seasonconcern.org again.
Yep.
You can find out about more about us, and you can even get in touch with me through there. So
yeah, I'll put the website for that in the show notes as well. for our
Amazing.
listeners. Easy clicking. And
Amazing.
since you did mention they can connect with you there, where else can our listeners find you online? Are you on the socials? You're not. That's okay. Some people are not. They'll get you through seasonofconcern.org.
Yeah.
That's how to get in touch with Mark Kaplan.
Yeah, get in touch with me. I'm serious. That's the way to get in touch with me. I'm sure I don't sounds dirty, so I don't Google myself.
That's
But
okay.
but I'm sure there's ways to get in touch with me. I'm not on the socials, but I'm going to be at the Marriott coming up in Little Shop of Horrors in the new year.
Fantastic.
And
One of my favorites. I'll be sure to see it.
and I'm in a movie that's coming out. Actually, I have one scene in a movie that's playing the film festivals now. So if you see the film Adult Children, I actually play I have an integral moment for one of the leading characters
Oh wow. Okay.
on her journey. Yes.
Okay. Adult children. It's the
Adult
festival circuit.
children.
It's the festival circuit right now. Is it going to be released? We
Yeah,
hope.
it is. We're hoping. I guess this is the way these things go. It's playing. It's playing the Chicago Film. In the film festival. I want to say it's there later this week
Okay.
or this weekend coming up. It's
Okay.
okay. Look up Adult Children. You'll find it. They're on the socials. So
Okay. Fantastic.
and
We
it's
will
a
do that.
great. It was a really fun, great experience that I actually filmed a few years ago. People should know that things are being filmed like crazy
Yeah.
in the Midwest and in Chicago. So I was lucky enough to be involved in that. So
Yeah. We're all very lucky. There's a plethora of work happening right here in town, for sure.
truly,
Yeah.
truly,
You mentioned in your intake form you wanted to maybe chat a little bit about life and art working in tandem. So I wanted to
yeah,
mention that because it seemed an important topic for you to discuss. So how would you like
it is.
to talk about that?
Well, some of it probably, John, we've already sort of
Yeah.
examples we've discussed.
Yeah.
I have realized in my continuing, I'm not saying my later years, but my continuing on this planet years,
Yes.
that how truly viable and valid and important what we do is to the world at large.
Yes.
So that said, I feel I feel fortunate to be able to tell stories that are important to what's happening to all of us and what have happened to us, and we're not just acting in metaphor or telling allegories. We're doing real live stuff here that has
Yes.
happened to all of us at large, whether we think that or not. That's my opinion, of course, but
Yes.
I welcome I welcome healthy debate. But to me, I have I've been lucky enough to be able to seek out the opportunities that, even whether they're at a writing table or they're at another non-theater entertainment experience, there's so much going on, that people have to get things out. And especially what's happening in the world, how we're being either censored or just discouraged, or you know because of the internet. Maybe this is why I'm not on social media, being waylaid into something else. We
Yeah.
our attention can get so sort of spliced and diverted. And I'm feel fortunate and proud to be sort of eyes on the prize of being, oh no, write about that. You need to write about that. I'm all about creating. I'm in a lot of sort of think tanks now, and sort of brain trusts of friends who want to get together and talk about what's next. And to me, that I guess that's in short, that's what I'm seeking out nowadays. I'm seeking out that kind of work. And even to say, there's stuff, you know, there are little shop what I'm about to do. There's themes in there that there's themes of exclusion and othering and you know
Greed.
greed,
Yeah.
entitlement, prejudice. If that's all in there.
Yeah.
And I feel like if we sort of, the art, I don't want to tell anybody how to do their art, but if we sort of attack these things of going, okay, this is the list, this is why we're doing what we're doing. And I don't, and sometimes doing theater to say, I just want to entertain people. That's great too.
Yeah.
That works because that also is important in the environment at present, and sort of being able to teach people how to breathe out or dispel that gnawing feeling that they're having and going, hey, this is over here too, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Give them a few hours of joy to forget about everything
Exactly.
else. Yeah. Well,
Exactly.
you mentioned being grateful and lucky, and I want to tell you that we, the Chicago theater community, are grateful and lucky to have you, Mark Kaplan, and I am grateful and lucky to have you as a friend.
I feel the same, my friend. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us at the Chicago Theater Makers Podcast. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. The Chicago Theater Makers Podcast is a production of Spirit Art LLC, and our podcast theme music is by Paul Langford. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the podcast, please drop us a note at our website, ChiTheaterMakersPodcast.com. That's ChiTheater, makers with an S, podcast.com. We hope you enjoyed spending time with us as much as we enjoyed spending it with you, and we'll see you on the board soon.